Thank you, French Shabbat Shalom. Greetings to you all. I hope you all are having a great week and that you're enjoying your journeys throughout life. We're about to watch an entire generation begin an unprecedented journey, but more on that in a moment. Now, I received a lot of comments from people who did not like the feeling of conditionality being placed on the people by God, and so they did look at things a little differently. And they say that even in sacred writings like the Torah, there are very confusing things, perhaps some political and perhaps some ego-driven. Now, like the great Mickey Newbury song said, I tripped on a cloud and fell 8 miles high. I tore my mind on the jagged sky. I just dropped in to see what condition my condition was in. Friends, we are simply used to living and loving conditionally, and it takes great effort to change. But as Yoda would say, change you will. Now, May 24th this year, which is both Bob Dylan's and Archibald Gelman's birthday, marks the festival of Shavuot 7, taking place 7 weeks after Passover and therefore called the Festival of Weeks. One of the three gathering festivals called for in the Torah, and it represents the day that God gave the Torah to the people. Now, the Torah does not tell us that. The Torah simply tells us it is one of the three gathering festivals. Torah exegesis tells us what it represented. When we say it is the day God gave the Torah to the people, you have to understand, Torah to us is a book composed of multiple writings. It's biblical. The Hebrew meaning is, of course, teaching. And so it was the day of the Sinai Epiphany, when God announced the Ten Commandments for all to witness. So have a fantastic festival of weeks, my friends. The counting of the Omer is complete, and a new counting is about to begin. Bamidbar in the wilderness, the book of Numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4. Can I have a little more? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I love you. Now, I was talking with a few people in the last several weeks about the concept of patrilineal and matrilineal descent, and how the Torah was patrilineal, but the religious rules have moved to a matrilineal system. Now, in this parsha, you see the true structure of membership. The census in the wilderness illustrates the family structure and relationship of the nation of Israel. All the children of Israel were one large family, and the hierarchical family relationships reveal the Bible's patriarchal worldview. The breakdown of the nation into tribe, clan, and household demonstrates the strong central position of fathers. The entire nation looked back to one common father. They were the descendants of Jacob, and each Israelite could trace his line of descent through one of the 12 sons of Jacob, 12 sons of Jacob being the 12 signs of the zodiac. Now, that line of descent formed his or her tribal identity. Those who were descended from a common father were referred to as a tribe. The 12 sons of Jacob were fathers over the 12 tribes. The tribes of Israel were further broken down into large extended families. The Hebrew word for family is mishpacha, but when used in the tribal sense, it does not refer to a nuclear family household. It refers to the large extended family of a common forefather within the tribe. And a better English word is clan. And a clan is like a sub-tribe, a tribe within a tribe. Now, every clan was composed of many households. The Hebrew word for household is beitav, a term that literally translates as house of a father. The father's household was composed of himself, his wife or wives, children, and grandchildren. And the common denominator in all these family rankings is the central position of a father. Now, in the biblical world, fatherhood, my friends, was the essential ingredient for family and identity. In today's day and age, that may be considered somewhat chauvinistic, but the biblical woman regarded her father and husband as her reputation and her identity. They were the affirmation of her femininity. They provided her protection, sustenance, and dignity. It's a very different way of thinking from what we have today. Now, also in the past, we've talked about naming conventions and how they're different between the English and the Hebrew. The English from a theme, and the Hebrew from an early word, usually in the first sentence of the parsha. This book is a perfect example of the difference in the naming convention. It opens with a census, and therefore it is the book of Numbers, but it is really the wilderness story. And that is the whole thing behind this. This is the true wilderness story of the Torah, and that is a by far better name. You know my name. Ba-bum-bum-ba-da. Look up the number. Friends, we are about to read the most unique generation in history. They were the witnesses to the Epiphany, and they would see and be the recipients of the daily miracles of God for the next 40 years. And the first 10 chapters are, by scholarly consensus, the work of priestly writers, and in a certain sense constitute nothing more than a continuation of Leviticus. The 4 initial chapters are taken up with this detailed tabulation of the census of the tribes conducted in the wilderness. This, of course, we know is a pointless exercise, since all these people are fated to die. It is the story of pomp. And when you read this early section, you know who is emphasized. And when the tabernacle travels, the Levites shall take it down. And when the tabernacle camps, the Levites shall set it up. And an outsider who comes close shall be put to death. And the Levites shall camp all around the tabernacle of the testimony, so there will not be a rage on the congregation of the children of Israel. And the Levites shall keep the charge of the tabernacle of the testimony. The Levites are to form a protective barrier to prevent anyone from violating the tabernacle, its equipment, and its functions. The Levites are cast as a kind of elite corps, a praetorian guard guarding the sanctuary. And friends, even they have a hierarchy. Only the consecrated Aaronite priests, not the Levites in whole, may touch or behold the sacred objects. Now, the priestly writer's enthusiasm for pageantry is manifested in this great initial roll call of the tribes, which is picked up in the review of the order of their march through the wilderness, and in the elaborately repetitive rehearsal of the gifts of the 12 chieftains. Now, in between these, we're given laws intended to protect cultic purity, with considerable attention devoted to the trial by ordeal of the wife suspected of adultery and to the Nazirite vow of abstinence. And then the dedication of the Levites and the ritual of the Passover offering. We will be repeatedly reminded of the passing of generations, as the story carries us to the border of the Promised Land. After the incident of the spies, the entire adult generation that came out of Egypt is fated to die before the promise of the land can be realized. Moses fails the test of trusting in God's well-prepared intervention when he strikes the rock on his own initiative in order to bring forth water, and as a result, he too will not be privileged to enter the land. Miriam and Aaron die. Moses' impending death on Mount Nebo is announced by God, and Joshua is lined up to succeed him as leader. Friends, Israel is on the move, but it's not until chapter 11. So from chapter 11 to the end, and it must be said that this text associates movement with trouble. After the initial choreographed procession of the teeming tribes, each arrayed in orderly fashion around its own banner, we get repeated representations of a motley crew of malcontents. The Hebrew derogatory, asufsuf, meaning riffraff, is really aptly invoked to characterize them. A mob churning with complaints and frustrated desires, fidgety under Moses' leadership, fed up with the hardships of the life in the wilderness, and nostalgic for the material comforts of life in Egypt. Now, the scheme of the recurring scene of the murmuring or complaining plays out as follows. The people bitterly protest their misery in the wilderness or Moses' leadership, or both. Now, God's wrath flares against the people, expressing itself in some sort of scourge that decimates the Israelite ranks. On more than one occasion, Moses intercedes, in 2 instances actually, after God threatens to wipe out the entire people and to begin anew with Moses, and then God finally relents. Now, the 2 most noticeable episodes of this Israelite insubordination are the mistranslated story of the spies, who report the fabulous bounty of the land, but despair of conquering it, and then seek to storm it without divine authorization, and the story of the mutiny and rebellion led by Korah. Restlessness under Moses' rule is so epidemic that even Miriam and Aaron are infected by it, at one point resentfully rebelling against their brother. This is not what we think of when we think of a journey. When we think of a journey, great stories come to mind. The Epic of Gilgamesh, considered the oldest known book, the Odyssey, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, The Wizard of Oz, wooden ships on the water, very free and easy, the way it's supposed to be. Silver people on the shoreline, let us be, talking about very free and easy. Somehow, my friends, this journey just never seems to be easy. This generation that cannot free itself from the slave mentality that it brought with it from Egypt also constitutes the beginnings of a people meant to realize a grand historical destiny. The journey in literature can be the experience of an individual or a group. In the book of Numbers, it is both. It is the people of Israel's journey from Sinai to the border of Canaan, from the site of the establishment of the covenant to the place where it is to be fulfilled. And it is Moses' journey from Mount Sinai to Mount Nebo, from the place where he has seen God to the place of his death. One must read the story in Numbers with a sense of what is pictured. A great mass of people, an entire nation in movement, with a visible miracle, the column of cloud and fire, and miraculous feeding, the manna, happening in their presence at all times over a span of 40 years. It is the only age in the Bible in which miracle is a daily fact of life. Now, the wilderness depiction conveys two quite different qualities. On the one hand, the wilderness years constitute a kind of ideal. The people's life is orderly, protected, the closest to God in history. It's a period of incubation, of nurturing. Everything is provided: food, water, direction. The miraculous is the norm. And at the same time, though, the wilderness is depicted as terrible and frightening, the way we still view it today. Conditions are bad. The environment is hostile. There is rebellion from within and fighting with peoples whom they encounter on the way. There are power struggles and fear. And this is pictured as having been almost entirely avoidable. Fate that has come upon the people for having rejected the opportunity to enter the land. Now, in the earthly events and in the cosmic aspect of both continuous and situational miracles, the wilderness generation is like no other. And so this book that tells its story is correspondingly unique. It is the only book dealing with one generation alone. Now, it's also a book that has one of the 10 preordained incidents determined at the time of creation, and perhaps one of the most interesting in the entire Torah. The brilliant centerpiece appearing in the midst of this epic journey among the citations of archaic poetry is the oracles of Balaam, which follow the story of Balaam and his she-ass, tracing a shrewd network of analogies to it. That story has often been characterized as a folktale. There are no other instances of talking animals in the historical narratives of the Bible. The only other candidate, the serpent in the garden story. Especially because, according to prevalent misconceptions and preconceptions, there is no humor in the Bible. It should be noted this story is quite funny, my friends. The humor serves the purpose of a monotheistic satire of pagan notions. The professional seer with independent powers to curse or bless, Balaam, the celebrated visionary, cannot see the sword-wielding divine messenger, who was plainly visible to his ass, and he is reduced to fuming frustration, finally engaging in an angry argument with his beast of burden. Balaam then plays the role of the ass, whose eyes and mouth are opened by God. It's a fantastic story. Do not take this book or these numbers too seriously. This is not about debating the numbers, but rather about recognizing the significance of the numbers to the Torah and to its story. Historically, only a portion of the Israelites may have had the experience of slavery in Egypt, but all of Israel came to see the experience as their own. For the Torah, it is important that the entire people of Israel be seen as present at Mount Sinai. And as you undertake your journey, my friends, think about the story, and I'm often asked to tell the story about the philosophy professor who stood before his class and picked up a large empty jar and proceeded to fill it with golf balls. Then asked the students if the jar was full, and they agreed that yes, it was. He then picked up a box of pebbles and poured them into the jar. He shook the jar lightly, and the pebbles rolled into the open areas between the golf balls. He asked the students again if the jar was full, and again they agreed that it was. Next, he picked up a box of sand and poured it into the jar. The sand filled up everything else, and he asked once more if the jar was full, and once more he was met with an undisputed yes. Now, to finish, he produced a couple of bottles of beverage from under the table, and he poured the entire contents of the jar, effectively filling all the empty space between the sand. And the class laughed. Now, said the professor, I want you to recognize that this jar represents your life. The golf balls are the important things. Your family, your children, your health, your friends, your passions. If everything else was lost and only they remained, your life would still be full. The pebbles are the other things that matter, like your job, your house, your car. The sand is everything else, the small stuff. If you put the sand into the jar first, there is no room for the pebbles or the golf balls. The same goes for life. If you spend all your time and energy on the small stuff, you will never have room for the things that are important to you. Pay attention, my friends, to the things that are critical to your happiness. Spend time with your children. Spend time with your parents. Visit with grandparents. Take your spouse out to dinner. Celebrate your passions. There will always be time to clean the house and mow the lawn. Friends, take care of the golf balls first. The things that really matter. Set your priorities. The rest is just sand. In the fury of the moment, I can see the master's hand in every leaf that trembles, in every grain of sand. And when one of the students asked about the drinks, the professor smiled and said, the drinks just show that no matter how full your life may seem, there is always room for a drink with a friend. The world is sacred, my friends. The journey you are on is sacred. Express your gratitude. Light a candle, make a wish. Celebrate your life and the lives of those you love. Live free, be free. Honor your freedom, be well and happy, be blessed. Share and honor the light and all who live in the light and continue to shine. Continue to send everyone you know goodwill and love. Pray for peace and freedom for everyone, an end to terror and hatred. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All good children go to heaven. And remember, friends, we are a community. We learn together. We celebrate each other. We love each other. Thank you all. Love you. See you all next time. Wishes do come true. Bless you all. Shabbat Shalom.